afternoon. How everybody doing out there today? It is the Grand Boulevard Coalition Hour, and we're here to speak about drug-free community. Today we have a guest, Max Knighton, who will speak in a second, but we want to make sure everybody know that Grand Boulevard Coalition, our email address is gbcchicago@gmail.com, and that's our phone number. And the number at the bottom of the screen is the number if you want to call in. Yes, we are live, and we hope to have some spirited conversation. Before we get to our guest Max here, we would like everybody to remember that this Saturday, March 3rd, we're having our first Bronzeville Speak of the Year at IIT. And it's going to be on opioids, the addiction crisis is a community response. Please RSVP at the bottom because we're already over 4 people, but still RSVP because people do register and then fall out. And again, it's March 3rd from 11:30 to 2 at Illinois Institute of Technology, and that's 10 West 35th Street, and they'll guide you up to the floor that we'll be on. So let's get right into it and introduce our guest again, Max Knighton. He is going to be one of the panel's expert to talk about this opioid crisis that we're having in our community, but he's going to talk about it from the Chicagoland area and maybe further out. Reach?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is a far-reaching epidemic. It's all over the country. So, okay. You obviously cannot help but elaborate on what's going on here in Chicago. But yeah, it just blossoms all over the country. It's very prevalent, in our communities. Both not only the usage of the prescription drugs, the prescription painkillers, but also the illicit ones as well.
Okay.
At this point, it is definitely at epidemic proportions. Even the president has acknowledged that, and is in the process of trying to address it, from a federal level.
Right.
And I think just about every community in the country is trying to come up with some kind of an answer.
Good. Well, let's back up a little bit, and I'm so rude. Let's tell the audience out here, we know your name, who do you work for? How do you come to be an expert or somebody in this field?
I'm here from Facing Addiction, which is a national organization that has formed to try and put an end to this horrible disease. Facing Addiction has partnered this year with the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, and these two leaders have merged in the field, and as of this year. In the past years, they played roles in the passages of the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, okay, and the 21st Century Cures Act. Facing Addiction itself, they launched in October 2015 with a huge concert and with the Unite to Face Addiction benefit in Washington, D.C. It drew tens of thousands of people to the National Mall to end the silence and the stigma that centers around substance abuse and drug addiction. I was selected for one of their their national pilot project, Chicago, along with 15 other cities around the country. Mm-hmm. And I have a partner in this, Dora Wright. She's the co-founder of the Chicago Recovering Communities Coalition.
Okay.
And together we have worked with Facing Addiction to train advocates. We've trained, the organization as a whole has trained over 500 individuals in the community. It's a grassroots approach to the problem. And they've done that over the last year with the plans to train twice as many in 2018.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As you know, Grand Boulevard Coalition, our mission is that our saying is most youth don't use. And one thing that we pride ourselves on as a community organization is to help educate people. And I wanted you maybe to address, as a prelude to Saturday's conversation, how is this problem having an effect on our youth?
Several different ways. First of all, taking it from the using parents' standpoint, if the parent is using addictive substances, then obviously it's going to affect the entire household.
Oh, okay.
Kids end up getting neglected. I think there was a big story just last week, and the president has talked about how families are adopting, children who are basically neglected and abandoned as a result of this growing crisis.
Okay.
So it affects them in that way. It also affects them directly. It's not like, unfortunately, children are not getting a hold to these substances too.
Okay.
They are. They either are reaching in their parents or grandparents' medicine cabinets and getting a hold to them, or they're buying it out on the streets. Okay. You can purchase lean, which is the codeine, promethazine. You can purchase that out on the streets nowadays, fairly easily.
Really? Okay.
And they are, they are getting a hold of that. They're going in the medicine cabinets, and of course, unfortunately, there's a lot of teens that are out just selling the drugs as well too.
Oh, okay. I think I saw on the spinoff of Blackish, the young lady who's at college, and yesterday was actually dealing with drugs.
Yes.
And her using it. Unfortunately, I forgot the name of the show, so I apologize. But it was a good show. It's probably one of the better ones of dealing with this subject. One thing we both have in common: we both live in Bronzeville.
Yes. Yes.
So we're neighbors. So I'm blind, so I don't see it. But you dealing with it. How and is it in our community of Bronzeville, and is it becoming prevalent?
It's getting a little worse. It's not. We're not. The concentration is really west and in the a little west of us or a little further south, or that's where the concentrations are, and that's where the majority of the overdose and the deaths are coming from.
Okay.
However, we are catching more. Unfortunately, we're catching more kids, out selling the drugs too. In our community,
Okay.
in our neighborhood. So, it's just a matter of time. It's like we always have the saying that if you're selling drugs, that's like a monkey selling bananas. Eventually, if you're around it long enough, then you're gonna start getting involved with it. Yeah.
Okay. That's just shocking. I have to really look out more about it and see what's really going on. And I'm glad that you're going to be a part of our event on Saturday. But this is really just starting the conversation. I think hopefully there might be some deliverables or some next steps that we as a group that come together on Saturday that can feed off from it, and maybe in 3 months down the road or 90 days when we hit summer, we'll come back together and see if there's been any changes or anything that we can enact with what's going on in the community and stuff.
Sure.
One more question. I mean, we have plenty of time. If anybody again want to call in and ask any questions, it's 312-738-1060. Why do you think was a suburban problem at first and then became a city problem? Or was that just as they like to say, the false narrative that it's been a problem everywhere, but because it's killing a lot more people in the suburbs, maybe percentage-wise than the amount of people who live there compared to in the city, because we obviously have a larger body of people, so we might not have as many. But why is it just now really beginning to hit the news, and it's like epidemic that the president, I think, had a meeting today in D.C. bringing people in? to address the opioid crisis?
It has been a problem. Drugs have been a problem in our community since the early '60s.
Okay.
It's getting the headlines now, okay, because the face of addiction is changing. Okay, no longer is addiction just limited to the idea of the junkie under the L tracks with the needle hanging out of his arm.
Right.
Okay, today the face of addiction now covers the grandmother who has suffered from chronic pain and as a result has been taking opiates or prescription painkillers.
Okay.
And once they run out, once you get to a certain point, then the brain just kind of changes,
Oh, okay.
and in the addiction process, and now it becomes a habit as opposed to just a treatment for a particular illness. So the face is changing. It's different people now. It's people from all walks of life because pain, unfortunately, strikes everybody. And so therefore painkillers are used by everybody, and you can't blame it on just one particular circumstance, but it is getting more. It's always been a predominant thing to address this issue with arrests, with more law enforcement, more policing, things of that nature, and mass incarceration.
Right.
Okay? Now you find that because of the fact that the faces have changed, okay, that now there's a much more sympathetic, much more empathetic approach.
Okay.
And addiction is now, instead of being recognized as a moral deficiency, it's now recognized as a bona fide disease and illness. And that's the approach that's now being used to address it. So that's the reason why it gets such a it's such a big deal now. It was it's always unfortunately been in the African American communities, okay, and it's been disproportionately so. But now that it is surfacing in other areas, okay, then it's garnering a lot more attention.
Good. Okay. On that note, because one thing you did say, I think you mentioned grandmothers or elders.
Sure.
And we both, again, live in Bronzeville community. We have a lot of senior living homes. And so one thing I want to let the senior people who might be watching and anybody in Bronzeville, if you might not be interested in our subject, the addiction crisis, but in your house you don't want to be a person to help cause or lead people on, we will be utilizing these packets Saturday. Drop off your unused drugs, your out-of-date drugs that you don't use anymore, no matter what those drugs are, or some of the community homes there, senior living homes want to bring them in the big buckets or whatever. We'll be taking those drugs, putting them in these packets, and once the drug and water mix with in these packets, it'll dissolve the drugs very safely, and it won't poison landfills and so on and so forth. So I just want people to know that we will be taking back drugs there and working with our third ward alderman, Pat Dow, and other community leaders into making sure that the word gets out on this part. And another point that I want to go back to now that at least I guess, how do our community and you and what you do with your organization can benefit more, because obviously now more money is being thrown into the problem, that now maybe we as African Americans in our community can get a little more money to maybe help in resources and stuff doing. What do you think? Have you seen more of that trickle-down effect, as they like to call it, that monies and support is coming into our community that has been neglected for so long?
Well, the troops are finally arriving, okay, but it's so late in the battle. I'm not going to be a pessimist and say that we can't win it, but it's definitely an uphill struggle. Resources are improving. We need a lot more. Chicago, according to the report I read from the Urban League, Chicago has disproportionately, one of the least amount of treatment and funding available for this crisis, and unless things get a lot better, then things are going to get a whole lot worse.
Was that Urban League, and that's a good thing, was the Urban League that you just addressed, was that the paper they did on the whitewash or
Yes,
or something?
yes,
So
yes.
you are on top of it. So that paper will actually be at the event, and let me just show that. The event that's going to be this Saturday, we will have a copy of that and address some of the issues that they have in there. As we get to our second forum, they will actually be more than willing. They want to come out and be a part of it.
Fantastic.
They're unfortunately, due to time and other commitments, they're not able, but they have shared that document with us. So that's great.
Yeah, it's a very important piece of work because it it has examined every area of this crisis, every area that it can affect, whether it be the actual overdose deaths, the availability of help and treatment. They address the lack of medication-assisted treatment that's available here in Chicago and in Illinois. It addresses just about every area of the crisis. I have to commend them. They did an excellent job.
And so are you. You're doing a great interview here. I thought I'm the only one nervous. You're like a pro. Maybe next time we'll have you over in this suit. Well, I mean, I know people saying, why is this guy on his phone? I'm not on my phone. I'm doing the social media thing too. And we got a quick question for social media. With the way social media has come on and people are buying everything on the internet these days, and I assume these drugs somehow, either on the black web or whatever, can be purchased on the internet. Have you seen social media affecting this to make it, sometimes you can use social media for good, and obviously sometimes it can be done for bad, that there's been a correlation in that?
Well, I don't think that I couldn't blame social media for an increase or a decrease in the epidemic at this point. I mean, the just as there's as people are ordering things, ordering more and more, able to order more and more things online, you also have a lot more restrictions too, and a lot more sanctions. The illicit drugs that are really plaguing the community are unfortunately just not coming from online distributors. The deaths, the recent increase in deaths from fentanyl, that basically is happening because fentanyl is added. Fentanyl, incidentally, is a substance. It's a painkiller that is used by prescription in hospitals in really severe conditions. Severe physical conditions. But what's happening is that's being added to what's been basic street heroin, over the course of the years. It's now being added. Fentanyl is anywhere from 40 to almost 100 times more powerful than heroin.
Wow.
And so when they add it to the heroin outside of the country, then it makes it in, and people are using it, then that's the reason why they're overdosing, because it's so much more powerful.
Yeah.
But no, I couldn't really blame that on social media.
Okay.
But we are using it to kind of get the word out and to make it known that the resources are available for those that need it.
One question over the last couple of weeks I've been asking my guests that's coming and going to be a part of the event is, their parents listening to this. What would you tell parents how to talk to their kids about this?
For your kids, you need to keep track of them. Find out what it is they're doing. I mean, they sure, they're children and they deserve, I guess teenagers deserve certain rights and privileges and whatnot. But I think it was an old president that told us to trust, but verify.
Okay.
Don't be ashamed to ask questions and to investigate and to probe what's going on. Know who your children are hanging out with. Okay, generally, speaking, if it's somebody that doesn't want to meet the parents, then it may not be somebody that you want your kids hanging around. So that's one thing. Educate them. A lot of the kids that I deal with on a regular basis, they're just not even familiar. They don't believe the fact that they can get hooked on substances. They may experiment for whatever reason, and without the proper knowledge that in a developing state, the various substances, they cause a lot of harm. They hinder the development, particularly of the brain, and particularly of the part of the brain that deals with good decision making. Hence, the reason why adults are in charge of children, because their brains are fully developed and they're capable of making much better decisions than their kids. A chemical change takes place after using so many chemicals for so long, for various reasons. And when that happens, then the development stops, particularly in kids. And as long as they continue to use, then that development, it's at a standstill. Okay, and the decision making processes are they just continue to falter.
Okay.
So it's important to try and educate your kids. And the worst part about that is that they don't know it. And they don't believe it.
Right.
There's this thing that we call confirmation bias, where they just don't believe, no matter what the evidence is that's placed in front of a kid.
Right.
They just don't believe it. It's like, this is how it is, and I don't care what you talking about. This is the situation. Okay, and it's not hurting. And the thing is that this lack or slowing of development is painless.
Oh, really?
It would be different, if you smoked a couple blunts, and you got this massive headache, and you could tell, all of a sudden, that wow, I can't think straight, I don't know anything, I can't make the right decision or anything. But that's not what happens.
Oh,
okay, you don't feel it. And since you don't feel it, then you feel like there's no damage being done.
Yeah, I never did know that.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We probably got about a minute and a half, and I want to take some time out to thank you. But I want you to talk about what you guys are doing and the services that you're bringing to the community. So if somebody's out there maybe suffering or this is resonate with them, how they can reach you guys and get some help.
Sure. We are in the process right now of course, we're going to be at the event Saturday, the Grand Boulevard Coalition. We will be there Saturday. There to answer any questions, to provide information for the community. We will be there recruiting people who want to help us in these efforts. My organization, Facing Addiction, will be there in full force, as well as my partner in the Chicagoland Pilot Project for that effort will be there, and we'll be available to provide any assistance that we can, whether it be a referral to treatment or whether it be just general information about substance use.
Great. And one more time before our time's up. Again, the opioid, the addiction crisis, this Saturday from 11:30 to 2 at Illinois State. I'm sorry, that's where I went to school. IIT in Chicago, 10 West 35th Street, and the registration is at the bottom. Our time is up. It seemed like it goes so fast. Thank you
Yes,
for
it
everybody
does.
for listening to us tonight. I want to thank Max. Max, I look forward to seeing you Saturday.
It's my pleasure. We'll be there.
Yes, take care.
All right.